Welcome to InfoStream, your daily current. Unsure what to listen to? Turn to us for today's headlines. Stay informed. Utah governor calls for self-reflection. U.S. sparks meeting possibilities. China accuses Nvidia of monopoly issues. Madeleine McCann. Investigation continues. A UK and U.S. partner on nuclear energy. Trump threatens emergency over cooperation. Routh trial approaches conclurencies. Cause economic disparities. Front Governor Kirk. U.S. military addresses drone technology. The Starlink failure to address their faces not Starlink interference for progress. Turbulent and planet trust. Utah governor urges Americans to look in the mirror amidst Charlie Kirk killing, following the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. Utah Governor Spencer Cox has issued a call for national introspection and a shift in the nation's political discourse. Cox, deeply affected by the event, is advocating for a more constructive approach to disagreement, urging Americans to examine their own motivations and actions in fueling political division. He specifically criticized conflict entrepreneurs who profit from radicalization, asserting that his own aim is to promote genuine understanding rather than exacerbate tensions. Cox emphasized the importance of respectful dialogue, even when addressing controversial viewpoints, and highlighted Kirk's efforts to foster a more robust and critical engagement with ideas. He called for a collective effort to move beyond inflammatory rhetoric and embrace a spirit of forgiveness and mutual respect. A TikTok deal framework reached between U.S. and China. Negotiations between the United States and China have resulted in the establishment of a framework for a deal concerning TikTok. This development follows the passage of a bipartisan bill by Congress and subsequent signing into law by former President Joe Biden. The legislation aimed to ban TikTok within the United States unless its Chinese parent company, ByteDance, divested its ownership. President Trump had previously delayed the implementation of this law multiple times while seeking a U.S. buyer for the social media platform. The newly agreed upon framework represents a significant step toward resolving the ongoing dispute and establishing clear guidelines for TikTok's operation in the United States. U.S.-China TikTok ownership deal reached, signaling potential Trump-Xi meeting, following months of negotiations and escalating trade tensions. The United States and China have reached a framework agreement regarding the ownership of TikTok's American operations. This development, announced amidst ongoing trade talks in Madrid, represents a significant step towards resolving a protracted conflict centered around national security concerns surrounding the popular social media platform. The agreement, brokered by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng, allows for U.S. ownership of TikTok's U.S. assets, effectively ending the immediate threat of a ban within the United States. The deal's emergence was spurred by President Donald Trump's leverage, which facilitated a shift in Chinese negotiating positions. Previously, China had resisted relinquishing control of TikTok, citing concerns about its own company's interests. The agreement's success is attributed to a combination of factors, including the impending deadline for a resolution and Trump's willingness to engage in direct communication with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Several investment groups, including one led by former Dodgers owner Frank McCourt and Kevin O'Leary, had expressed interest in acquiring TikTok's U.S. assets, particularly its algorithm. However, industry analysts believe Oracle, already hosting TikTok's U.S. data, is the most likely purchaser. The framework includes a potential 50-50 joint venture, though the specifics of ownership remain somewhat unclear. The deal's conclusion appears to pave the way for a planned meeting between Trump and Xi Jinping, potentially taking place during Trump's Asia trip in late October or early November. Both sides have sought such a meeting for months. Trump's announcement on Truth Social highlighted the very well trade discussions and the certain company's positive reaction. The agreement follows a protracted period of escalating trade tensions, including China's antitrust action against Nvidia. The U.S. had previously enacted legislation, including a ban on TikTok, which prompted a rushed resolution. The framework represents a key step toward de-escalating trade relations and potentially opening the door for further diplomatic engagement. The deal's success is viewed as a precursor to a planned meeting between the two leaders, marking a significant moment in the ongoing U.S.-China relationship. China accuses Nvidia of anti-monopoly violation, intensifying trade tensions. China has formally accused Nvidia of violating Chinese anti-monopoly laws, escalating already significant trade tensions between the two nations. The State Administration for Market Regulation announced the ongoing investigation, stemming from concerns over Nvidia's acquisition of Israeli chip designer Mellanox Technologies, approved in 2020. Details remain scarce, but the investigation signifies a major escalation in the ongoing trade dispute. Concurrent with these developments, U.S. and Chinese diplomats engaged in a fourth round of trade talks in Madrid, led by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and China's He Lifeng. While discussions reportedly progressed, the situation remains complex, marked by a series of retaliatory actions. The U.S. Commerce Department recently placed two Chinese chipmakers, GMC Semiconductor Technology Co. and Jikan Semiconductor Technology, on the entity list, barring them from purchasing U.S. semiconductor technology. A key element of the negotiations revolves around Nvidia's access to the Chinese market. Following a deal brokered in the Oval Office last month, Nvidia, along with AMD, agreed to pay the U.S. government 15% of their revenues from semiconductor sales to China, in exchange for licenses to export stripped-down versions of their technology. This agreement aimed to maintain America's AI dominance while fostering trade discussions. However, China's concerns persist, particularly regarding Nvidia's H20 chips, which have been linked to the development of DeepSeek, a sophisticated Chinese AI model. Security concerns surrounding the chips have fueled skepticism. Despite the U.S. easing export restrictions, China is likely continuing to acquire the technology through unofficial channels. The investigation into Nvidia's acquisition highlights the strategic importance of semiconductors to both nations, particularly in the context of artificial intelligence. The ongoing trade talks and retaliatory measures underscore the deep-seated rivalry and the potential for further disruption to global supply chains. The situation is dynamic, with no immediate resolution in sight, and the impact on the semiconductor market remains uncertain. Both countries are determined to secure technological leadership, making the trade conflict a protracted and complex issue. Madeleine McCann. British police pursue suspect despite refusal to cooperate. The Metropolitan Police's ongoing investigation into the disappearance of Madeleine McCann has faced a significant setback as the prime suspect, Christian Breitner, has refused to be interviewed. Breitner, a 49-year-old German national, is currently serving a 7-year prison sentence in Germany for the rape of a 72-year-old woman in Praia da Luz, Portugal, and is set to be released by Wednesday. British police have long considered him a primary suspect in McCann's disappearance, initially identifying him in 2020. Despite his imminent release, the Met Police formally requested an interview with Breitner, utilizing the standard procedure of an international letter of request due to legal constraints. However, Breitner rejected this request, effectively shutting down direct questioning by British investigators. Det Agents Mark Cranwell, senior investigating officer from the Metropolitan Police, confirmed the refusal and stated that the investigation will continue to pursue any viable lines of inquiry. Breitner's history is marked by previous convictions, including convictions for sexually abusing children in 1994 and 2016, as well as a history as a drifter and petty criminal. German prosecutors have consistently pointed to evidence, including mobile phone data, suggesting he was present in Praia da Luz at the time of McCann's vanishing, leading them to believe he is responsible. However, a lack of definitive proof has prevented charges from being filed. Recent searches conducted in June by Portuguese and German police, focusing on areas linked to Breitner and where the McCann family had been staying, yielded no breakthroughs. The investigation remains ongoing, and the refusal to cooperate from Breitner presents a considerable challenge. The Met Police are reliant on pursuing other investigative avenues while awaiting Breitner's release. They have stated that any questions regarding his release should be directed to the German authorities. The case remains one of the world's most high-profile, unsolved missing person cases, with no resolution in sight. UK and US announced nuclear energy collaboration. The United Kingdom and the United States are forging a strategic partnership to accelerate the development of nuclear power, aiming to generate thousands of jobs and bolster Britain's energy security. This initiative, dubbed the Atlantic Partnership for Advanced Nuclear Energy, is slated for formal signing during U.S. President Donald Trump's state visit. A core objective is to dramatically reduce the time required for regulatory approvals, targeting a cut from up to 4 years to just 2, facilitating quicker project deployment. The agreement centers around advanced modular reactors, AMRs, and small modular reactors, SMRs, representing a shift from traditional large-scale nuclear designs. Centrica, owner of British Gas, is partnering with X-Energy to construct up to 12 AMRs in Hartlepool, potentially powering 1.5 million homes. These AMRs utilize helium as a coolant, contrasting with water-cooled SMRs developed by Rolls-Royce, intended for use across the UK. X-Energy's Texas project, involving Dow and chemicals giant, is progressing, though regulatory hurdles have delayed its permit application. The project envisions a replicable model for global manufacturers. Both SMRs and AMRs leverage nuclear reactions to generate heat and electricity, though SMRs produce around a third of the output. The modular design of SMRs allows for factory-built construction and assembly, offering a potentially faster and more cost-effective approach. However, the SMR industry remains nascent, with various designs under investigation. Despite the potential benefits, concerns remain. Greenpeace criticizes the focus on nuclear, predicting higher energy bills and increased carbon emissions due to construction delays. The escalating cost of the Sizewell C project, now at $38 billion, underscores the financial risks associated with large nuclear developments. Centrica acknowledges the potential for delays and cost overruns, but emphasizes the learning curve associated with repeated SMR construction, suggesting that increased production volume will ultimately improve efficiency and reliability. The collaboration represents a significant, albeit complex, effort to diversify Britain's energy sources and stimulate economic growth. Donald Trump's unprecedented UK state visit details. Donald Trump's upcoming state visit to the United Kingdom, commencing on Tuesday, September 16th, and concluding on Thursday, September 18th, marks an unusual event given historical precedent and current political climate. King Charles III has extended an invitation, a move described as truly historic and unprecedented by Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer. This visit, occurring 2 months after Trump's time in Scotland, is being heavily secured with planned airspace restrictions and significant police deployment, estimated to cost the Metropolitan Police $3.4 million. The visit will feature a formal welcome at Windsor Castle, including a royal salute and a flypast with UK and US F-35 military jets and the Red Arrows. Trump will lay a wreath at St. George's Chapel in honor of Queen Elizabeth II. A state banquet will be held on Wednesday evening, with both the King and President delivering speeches. On Thursday, Trump will travel to Chequers to meet with Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, tour the Sir Winston Churchill Archives, and hold a news conference. Melania Trump will participate in a series of engagements, including a tour of the Royal Library and a meeting with Chief Scout Dwayne Fields. However, the visit is not without controversy. The Stop Trump Coalition is planning a demonstration in London on Wednesday, September 17th, protesting Trump's policies. Protests are also expected in Aberdeen and Edinburgh, where similar demonstrations occurred during Trump's recent visit to Scotland. Liberal Democrat leader Sir Ed Davey has announced his intention to boycott the ceremonial banquet to express concern over the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. King Charles III has previously hosted state visits, most recently welcoming French President Emmanuel Macron in July. The security preparations for Trump's visit are extensive, mirroring the scale of the 2019 state visit, which involved a customized Boeing 747-200B aircraft and a significant motorcade. The visit represents a significant moment in Anglo-American relations, complicated by differing political viewpoints and ongoing international issues. Trump threatens national emergency again over lack of police cooperation. President Donald Trump announced his intention to declare a national emergency in Washington, D.C. if local police fail to cooperate with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. This follows the expiration of his previous emergency declaration, implemented in August, which included the temporary deployment of National Guard troops. Trump asserted that the initial emergency successfully reduced crime rates in the district, but threatened a resurgence if the Metropolitan Police Department, MPD, does not participate in immigration enforcement. Washington Mayor Muriel Bowser responded by issuing an order requiring indefinite cooperation with federal law enforcement, clarifying that the MPD's role does not encompass immigration enforcement, and that the department would return to its status quo. Bowser emphasized that immigration enforcement is not the MPD's responsibility. Trump criticized Bowser's actions, accusing her of allowing a violent criminal takeover of the Capitol, and threatened to redeclare the emergency, potentially federalizing the police force. He expressed concern that a failure to cooperate would lead to a return of crime. Despite Trump's claims, crime rates in Washington have not entirely disappeared, and the federal operation remains unpopular with residents, with approximately 8 in 10 opposing it. The operation has resulted in a surge of immigration arrests, causing fear among immigrant workers. The situation is complicated by Washington's Home Rule Act, which allows the president to take control of the city's police for 30 days during an emergency, but any extension requires congressional approval. Trump has previously threatened to deploy National Guard troops to other cities, including Chicago, Boston, and Memphis, Tennessee, though plans to send troops to Chicago were shelved due to potential legal challenges. Bowser's initial order focused on immigration enforcement and homeless encampment enforcement. According to Attorney General Pam Bondi, the operation's impact is being felt by the city's immigrant population, who report increased fear and apprehension. The ongoing tensions highlight the conflict between federal and local authorities regarding immigration enforcement and the exercise of executive power. The future of the federal operation and the potential for a renewed national emergency remain uncertain, dependent on the cooperation or lack thereof of the MPD. Routh trial nears close, with witness testimony expected. The federal trial of Ryan Routh, charged with attempting to assassinate then-candidate Donald Trump, is rapidly approaching its conclusion, with prosecutors anticipating to wrap up their case by the end of the week. Judge McCann has instructed Routh to present his witnesses starting Friday, marking a significant shift in the trial's momentum. Routh, representing himself, faces 5 charges including attempted assassination, assaulting a federal officer, and possessing a firearm as a felon. The trial has progressed faster than anticipated, largely due to Routh's self-representation and limited cross-examination of prosecution witnesses. During the first 2 days, prosecutors called 13 witnesses, but were forced to conclude early on Friday when they ran out of available witnesses. Routh's initial opening statement was disrupted by Judge McCann, who expressed her limited patience and warned him against making a mockery of the courtroom. Key government witnesses have provided detailed accounts of the events leading up to the alleged plot. Secret Service agent Robert Firkino testified to being just 5 feet away from Routh at the Trump International Golf Club, describing Routh's demeanor as smiling and groaning before fleeing. Tommy McGee, who followed Routh after witnessing a frantic and disheveled individual, provided photographic evidence and identified Routh's vehicle. FBI agent Catherine Rose presented evidence discovered at Routh's observation post, including the SKS rifle magazine, single bullet, bungee cords, rifle scope, and GoPro-style camera. The prosecution highlighted Routh's meticulous planning, referencing a gear list containing reminders like de-apers and spray self with bug spray. Routh's erratic opening statement, which included references to genocide, Netanyahu, Putin, and Hitler, further underscored the unusual nature of the case. The government's evidence, coupled with Routh's actions, paints a picture of a carefully crafted and serious attempt to harm a presidential candidate. The trial's conclusion is imminent, and the jury will ultimately determine Routh's fate. Trump's tariffs and tax cuts. A disproportionate impact. A recent analysis reveals that President Donald Trump's tariff policy and the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, tax cuts, are creating a system where the wealthiest Americans benefit significantly, while negatively impacting lower-income households and the overall economy. Yale University's Budget Lab has extensively studied the effects, concluding that tariffs will ultimately cost most Americans, particularly those with lower incomes, more than the tax cuts provide. The core finding is that tariffs, designed to protect domestic industries, are actually increasing the tax burden on consumers. The average household could pay an additional $2,300 due to tariff-induced price increases, nearly 3 times the roughly $800 benefit from the tax cuts. While the top 10% of earners, those making an average of $519,000 annually, will see a tax reduction of approximately $13,600, with a $5,450 increase in spending due to tariffs. The impact is far more severe for middle-income households earning $105,122, who face a $2,200 tariff increase, in lower-income households earning under $39,000, who could see an income drop of nearly $2,600. The tax cuts themselves are largely extensions of temporary provisions that were set to expire, resulting in an average tax cut of $3,000 when including these extensions. However, the tariff policy significantly exacerbates this disparity. The Congressional Budget Office projects that tariffs will reduce the federal deficit by $3.3 trillion over the next decade, but the overall debt is still expected to increase by $4.1 trillion between 2025 and 2034, largely due to the tariffs. Furthermore, the tax cuts are riddled with special interest provisions, such as enhanced state and local tax deductions for East Coast homeowners and breaks for specific industries like oil and gas companies, rum producers, and whalers, leading to a more unequal and unstable fiscal system. Adam Michel, a director at the Cato Institute, highlights the potential for increased inequality and instability. While the tariffs are projected to outweigh the tax cuts for most Americans, the combined effect of these policies will likely worsen economic disparities and contribute to a less stable economic future. Trump administration intensifies push to oust Fed Governor Lisa Cook. The Trump administration has escalated its efforts to remove Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook, a move occurring ahead of a crucial interest rate decision by the central bank this week. The administration filed a renewed request with the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia on Sunday, intensifying the political pressure surrounding Cook's tenure. This action underscores President Trump's continued criticism of Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell and his desire for lower interest rates. The administration's argument centers on concerns regarding Cook's financial history, specifically accusations of mortgage fraud initiated by Bill Polt, the director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency. Trump publicly demanded Cook's removal on August 25th, citing these allegations as grounds for dismissal. The administration contends that Cook's past financial dealings raise questions about her trustworthiness and potential influence over the U.S. money supply. Cook's legal team has vigorously contested the administration's request, arguing that the lack of sufficient evidence warrants a rejection of the dismissal bid. They assert that removing Cook would jeopardize the Fed's independence and, consequently, the nation's economic stability. They highlight the potential consequences, warning of increased inflation and higher interest rates if the Fed's autonomy is compromised. The legal battle is particularly sensitive given the upcoming interest rate vote. The Fed's independence is a cornerstone of U.S. economic policy, and the Trump administration's actions represent a significant challenge to that principle. The outcome of this legal challenge will undoubtedly have ramifications for the future direction of monetary policy and the broader U.S. economy. Cook's legal team's response and the court's decision will be closely watched by economists and financial analysts. U.S. drone dilemma: militaries catch up on the modern battlefield. The United States military is grappling with a significant challenge, lagging behind in drone warfare, a domain rapidly transformed by the Ukraine conflict. American soldiers, particularly at Fort Bliss, are undergoing intensive training to operate small, inexpensive drones, primarily due to Russia's widespread use of these systems in Ukraine. This shift highlights a critical gap in the U.S. military's preparedness for future conflicts. The US's traditional focus on large, expensive weaponry, fighter jets, tanks, and precision-guided missiles has left it behind in the proliferation of smaller, more agile drones. The need for rapid adaptation is underscored by the Ukrainian military's success utilizing drones for reconnaissance, attack, and logistical support. Several key factors contribute to this situation. Firstly, the Pentagon's historical approach to acquiring defense systems has been slow and cumbersome, failing to prioritize the development and deployment of smaller, more affordable drones. Secondly, the U.S. military's reliance on components from Chinese manufacturers, particularly DJI, presents a logistical challenge given restrictions on foreign parts. Thirdly, the rapid innovation occurring in Ukraine with companies like Neros and Brave One has created a competitive advantage. The training at Fort Bliss emphasizes operating FPVs, first-person view drones, a technology that allows the operator to see the world through the drone's camera. The Ukrainian military's approach to utilizing drones has been instrumental in bolstering their defense strategy, and the U.S. is now seeking to emulate this success. Several companies, including Neros and Anduril Industries, are working with the Pentagon to scale up drone production. The Replicator initiative, aiming to produce 3,000 drones within 2 years, is a key element of this effort. Ukraine's defense minister, Fedorov, has emphasized the importance of continuous technological advancement, stating that the winner is who can update their technology the fastest. The conflict in Ukraine has created a dynamic arms race, with both sides constantly developing new drone technologies. The U.S. military is now recognizing the necessity of adapting to this evolving landscape, and the training and production efforts reflect this urgent need. The success of Ukrainian drone units, and the data they generate, are being leveraged by other nations for AI training and development. The proliferation of drones across the globe is fundamentally altering the nature of warfare. Starlink outage disrupts Ukrainian military communications. A significant disruption to Elon Musk's Starlink satellite internet service impacted tens of thousands of users globally, with a particularly critical effect on Ukrainian military operations. The outage, detected on Monday, began with over 37,000 reported issues among U.S. users, according to DownDetector.com, dropping to hundreds by 1:30 a.m. ET. The core problem centered on a complete cessation of service along Ukraine's entire front line, as confirmed by Robert Major-Brovdy, commander of Ukraine's Unmanned Systems Force, around 7:30 a.m. Kyiv time. Gradual restoration of service commenced shortly after, but the incident highlighted a recurring vulnerability for Ukrainian forces reliant on Starlink. With over 6 million global users, Starlink provides high-speed internet via a network of low Earth orbit satellites, crucial for remote locations. Ukraine has heavily depended on Starlink to operate its drone fleet during the ongoing Russian invasion. This outage represents the second major disruption within 2 months, specifically affecting Ukraine. On July 24th, Starlink experienced a 2-hour outage, forcing a temporary halt to live combat streams. Brovdy emphasized the need to address potential bottlenecks and diversify communication channels. Starlink acknowledged the issue, stating they were investigating the cause. The disruption underscores the importance of redundancy in Ukraine's defense infrastructure, particularly given its dependence on this external internet source. The incident's duration, approximately 150 minutes, further intensified the operational challenges faced by Ukrainian forces. SpaceX has yet to provide a specific explanation for the outage, leaving the precise cause under investigation. The situation highlights the geopolitical sensitivity surrounding Starlink's role in the conflict and the potential for disruptions to critical military communications. Australia faces severe climate risk. Landmark report highlights coastal vulnerability. A recently released National Climate Risk Assessment has issued a stark warning. Australia is facing a significant increase in climate-related threats, with 1.5 million Australians at risk from rising sea levels by 2050. The report, Australia's first of its kind, details the escalating consequences of global warming and highlights the nation's already exceeded 1.5 degrees of warming. It projects a cascade of severe hazards, including more frequent and intense floods, cyclones, heat waves, and droughts, alongside exacerbated bushfires. The assessment examines 3 potential warming scenarios: above 1.5 degrees C, above 2 degrees C, and above 3 degrees C, revealing that no Australian community will be immune. Specifically, projections indicate a dramatic increase in heat-related deaths, with potential rises of over 400% in Sydney and nearly triple in Melbourne under a 3 degrees C warming scenario. Furthermore, the report estimates a potential property value decline of $611 billion to $406 billion, equate $300 billion across the country. The assessment emphasizes the interconnectedness of these risks, predicting poorer water quality due to flooding and bushfires, alongside detrimental impacts on natural species and ecosystems, including the Great Barrier Reef and Ningaloo Reef, which are already experiencing record bleaching events. These vulnerable areas face heightened risks of further bleaching and biodiversity loss due to warming ocean temperatures. The report underscores the urgent need for emissions reduction targets, scheduled to be announced shortly, and highlights the vulnerability of northern Australia, remote communities, and the outer suburbs of major cities. The escalating risks pose substantial challenges for emergency responders and threaten critical infrastructure. The assessment's findings reinforce the immediate necessity of proactive climate adaptation strategies to mitigate the devastating consequences anticipated by 2050, considering the current population levels. Belarusian-Russian firepower signals warning to Europe. Joint military exercises, known as West 2025, involving Belarusian and Russian forces at the Borisovsky training ground, are generating significant concern across Europe. The drills, involving artillery, mortar fire, helicopter gunships, and Sukhoi 34 bombers, are occurring amidst heightened tensions in the Eastern European region, particularly with the ongoing war in Ukraine. While officially presented as purely defensive maneuvers aimed at bolstering security for Russia and Belarus and countering potential external threats, the scale and intensity of the exercises are viewed with suspicion. The West 2025 drills, which take place every 4 years, involved a reduced number of troops compared to 2022's 200,000. Representatives from 23 states, including the U.S., Turkey, and Hungary, observed the exercises, with Belarusian officials emphasizing the unprecedented transparency of the event. Major General Valery Ravenko stated that the drills are not intended as threats and advocate for constructive dialogue. However, the exercises coincide with a period of escalating tensions. Poland's border closure ahead of the drills triggered a strong response from Minsk, and recent incidents, including a Russian drone incursion into Polish airspace and a similar breach in Romanian airspace, have fueled fears of a deliberate strategy by Moscow to test the resolve of European leaders and the NATO alliance. The decision to invite international media to the West 2025 exercise is being interpreted in 2 ways: as an attempt at transparency by Minsk, and perhaps more significantly, as a deliberate signal to the West, particularly Europe, highlighting the substantial firepower located on its doorstep. The drill's message appears to be a warning: direct confrontation with Moscow is not in Europe's best interest. Relations between Russia, Belarus, and Europe remain strained, with Moscow seeking to improve ties with Washington, while maintaining difficult relationships with European nations. The continued incidents involving Russian drones underscore the precarious security situation and the need for a unified response from NATO. Escalating tensions between U.S. and Venezuela amidst accusations and retaliations. The United States and Venezuela are embroiled in a rapidly escalating crisis characterized by reciprocal accusations and military posturing. Donald Trump has repeatedly asserted that Venezuela is actively supplying the United States with gang members and illicit drugs, framing this as an unacceptable situation. This assertion stems from the deployment of U.S. warships to the southern Caribbean, ostensibly for counter-narcotics operations. A significant event occurred on September 2nd when U.S. forces launched a targeted attack on a vessel believed to be transporting drugs from Venezuela, resulting in the deaths of all 11 individuals on board. Following this attack, tensions heightened considerably. Venezuela responded by deploying 2 F-16 fighter jets over a U.S. Navy destroyer on September 4th, a move that prompted Trump to issue a stark warning, threatening to shoot down any Venezuelan aircraft deemed to pose a dangerous situation. Subsequently, further friction emerged on September 9th when Venezuelan Foreign Minister Yvonne Gil accused U.S. forces of illegally seizing a small, harmless fishing boat for 8 hours. This incident triggered a Ministry of Information release of a photograph depicting the vessel in question. The U.S. naval presence and subsequent attack have been met with considerable legal scrutiny, raising concerns about potential violations of international law. The exchange of military actions, including the interception of the Venezuelan fishing boat, demonstrates a dangerous deterioration in diplomatic relations between the two nations. The potential for further escalation remains high, with both sides exhibiting a willingness to engage in assertive responses to perceived threats. The situation is further complicated by the lack of direct communication and the continued dissemination of inflammatory rhetoric from key figures on both sides, creating a volatile and unpredictable environment. The ongoing maritime traffic reduction in the southern Caribbean underscores the impact of these heightened tensions.